Traci, thank you so very much for being willing to share some of your beautiful, filled with wonder. I love the aspect of like a wonder surprise. I'm a kind of a Chesterton nerd, and I love the wonder and the surprise and the gratefulness, the gratitude, and your smiling eyes. We talked about that a little bit earlier, but thank you so much for being able to share about your experience with neurodivergence, but also as you being a poet and a creative, and there's a number of different things that I'm really looking forward to talking to you about. But thank you so very much for being willing to do this. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just for the basic stuff to start off with, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, why you are where you're at, and those type of things?
So this was definitely not, I guess, planned. I was actually trying to be a certified teacher, elementary school teacher, following in my father's footsteps. My father taught at the same school for over 40 years. And so we were both good with young people. So I was like, oh, I guess I'll do that because even though I wanted to write since I was 5. Um, I feel my parents meant well that they felt I should try to find a more stable career. So I chose
Mhm.
teaching, but it never happened. So I finally found the courage during the pandemic to pursue it, more. And so I was able to transition out from my job before, which was a preschool assistant for a teacher. And so from there, my mindset with my autism is the mindset of a child. So I kind of have this fearless mindset as far as, just go for it. You never know. And so I'm always been different. I knew I was different, but being late diagnosed, it just really helped for me to understand why I was different. And when I took that leap of faith, I was like, I want to do radio. So I actually started in the media in radio. So I did radio and then I was like, okay, let's try, something else. I did some magazines, other ventures and podcasts and television. I just wanted to see where I could get my foot in the door. And I actually was on social media for about a year with the poetry, just about a year. I got off in October 2021 before I found out that I got my business trademark. So it was
Okay.
really cool. It was a good transition. And I learned a lot in social media as far as connections and being able to, just put yourself out there, talk to people. I am big on talking to people and just not, taking word of mouth. I, I'm my own voice. So I would just talk to different people and get advice, from people that are doing things that I want to do. And so I learned a lot from that. I tell people some of my many mentors were pretty tough. My website doesn't look anything like it used to look when I first started, but I feel like the people that were in my life at the time really pushed me to go higher as far as how I thought and my expectations. So I'm very thankful for them that even though it was kind of tough, they made me better because I feel like they could see something in me I couldn't even see in myself.
In terms of the poetry, so now someone would look you up and go, okay, Traci Neal, poet, creative. Have you always had that interest? Like, so you said, okay, so you wanted to be a writer since 5. Was it something that you've always kind of practiced? And hopefully your parents gave you some allowance for that expression.
They did. They did. I did a good bit when I was a teenager. So I started pursuing poetry more as a teenager and being something that I wanted to do at 13 when my seventh grade teacher, asked the class to do a poetry book. So we had to do a collection of poems for the whole year. So I got that exposure to it. And I was like, I really want to, I think this might be something I want to do. But it was confirmed, honestly, from my mother My mother took me to my first open mic. And the open mic was at the time South Carolina Book Festival, and it's no longer in existence. But at the time, I was the youngest in there. I was 14 years old amongst college people and
Okay.
professors and adults. And I actually had brought my poems, my book of poems that I had in a folder. And my mom said, "Oh, you should go up there and read one." I didn't go up there and read, I performed. And then she said, "Oh, you have something." You got
Oh,
it.
okay.
You
Okay.
got
Okay.
it.
Uh, uh, uh.
So I'm always grateful for my mother for that, just confirming to me. And my mother writes, so.
Okay. Okay. Mhm. And in terms of, okay, so you mentioned in an email, and then looking and scrolling down all the various places that you published, and you mentioned, it's one thing to get some poems, and that's great, but you have an abundance of poems. Like I look and I go, wow, that's a lot of publications in terms of the titles, right?
Yes. So it's like I told you, they're gonna have to pay for that knowledge because it's I told my husband, I said it's a lot of information that's being put out there, as far as, oh, this is how you can get published. This is how you can do this, that, and the third. But for me, I'm about the evidence because things change, consistently. So, okay, you're telling me I should do this, to get into this. Where's the evidence like that your method actually works? So I know that by me having all those publications that people are going to be curious as to how I did it. I am not going to, deny that it was work, but the method works. And as I was telling my husband as well, that the information that I gained, that I learned from God, that he gave me, is something that not just a writer can use, anyone can use for their success. So that's why I said they're going to have to pay me for that because, it's not just in one box, it's for anyone that can use this method to help them with entrepreneurship or their business. So, yes.
Mhm. 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 And we will have links down, for the website, and people can look at you further.
Yes.
In terms of, so things within Christianity can be a little bit slower to develop. So when the term mental health came out, and the things that go along with that, Christians sometimes are a little bit slow to pick up on it. I think now it's generally in Christian parlance. People are talking about it. There's Christian counselors, or there's all kinds of podcasts and books, and that's a wonderful thing. But coming from an individual person like yourself, so I'm always curious with something like the ADHD, with autism, and these are labels that people throw around. What would you, as a person who, actually, it's a good question. Do you identify as someone who has that? Like, how do you how would you identify yourself?
I identify myself as neurodivergent, but I,
Okay.
I do not hesitate to mention, what my neurodivergence is.
Okay.
So I'm not ashamed of it.
Right. Right. And are there things like when you talk to your, some Christian friends, or maybe in a church, what would you want people to know about yourself that you often find I wish they would know that, if you were able to get them to know things, what would you want them to know that they don't?
That you cannot look at someone and tell, what they have or their differences. As I shared with you before we started, that I find in the Black community that when you mention autism and ADHD, there's like this negative stigma to it, unless you're in the gifted category. And for me, I'm not ashamed to say that I am level 2. It shocks people, when I say that I'm level 2 and that I am considered nonverbal. I know that some people use that term to just mean not talking, but there is a broader spectrum when it comes to nonverbal. For me, I have difficulty explaining things. So I show how I feel on my face. I can tell you a lot on my face. And the kids, I used to work with kids, is, I they knew my faces. So if I wanted them to behave, they knew. They knew, like, okay. She went from happy to okay. So they could pick up on it. And so now it's been helpful for me to not feel as though, okay, I express how I feel on my face. I'm not always able to explain things. So I am going to ask a lot of questions. So when you think of a child that asks a lot of questions, I do that, because of how I think, that I have to
Mhm.
ask a lot of questions. So as I mentioned, prior, I'm not annoyed by, young people asking questions, because I ask questions. And if there is something I don't know, I am not ashamed to say as an adult, I don't know. Let's find out. Let's research it together. Let's learn it together. Let's grow together. And I think that was one of the things that the youth appreciated about me, that I'm not ashamed to say I don't know something. I'm not ashamed to say that, okay, let's figure it out together. Let's grow together. So
Mhm. Mhm. That must make you in a way that's kind of like, excuse me. So within Christianity, we know that God really digs humility. Like really, right? That's a really, really important thing in Christianity. And I think it makes Christianity really, really unique, and that God, all powerful, loves humility. It's cool. And at least it can be a sign of people who are humble, is saying, I don't know. Because it allows you can learn all kinds of things that you wouldn't have otherwise known, because you just are humble enough to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know." Can you just explain that again? So you probably, like, people who ask, "I don't know," and are willing to express that vulnerability, probably actually know some things that people who don't ask wouldn't. Right.
I love how you said that. For me, I value the fact that with my faith, I know I need God. Like that's it. That's the beauty of it. And I want anyone to know that when you realize that you need God, that will change your life. That will impact your life for the better. Before I knew about my neurodivergence, trying to navigate life on my own and act like, oh, I got this, I can handle this. This isn't a lot. Yes, it is. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I don't have this. This is too much for me. This is overwhelming me. And that has been so helpful to my health, to my well-being, to my clarity of mind. You have to know what you can handle and what you can't. And it's okay if you can't. And if you can't, make adjustments, ask for help, seek the Lord, and you'll have peace of mind. There's nothing, you can't pay for peace.
Mhm.
You cannot pay for peace.
Mhm. In terms of, are there misconceptions about neurodivergence that you see people having that are problematic?
I think one of the misconceptions, I only speak for, mine, with being level 2, is that almost like that we're incapable of doing things.
Mhm.
That I grew up in a household where my parents would tell me, you are different, but they never made me feel like I couldn't do things.
Mhm.
They instilled in my mind that go for it, figure it out. If there's something that you can't do, you figure it out. Like, don't just say automatically, I can't do it. Figure it out. And I think that really makes a difference. And I want parents to know that, with our mindsets, that if you tell us that we cannot do something, that is ingrained in us and we won't even try.
Mhm.
So sometimes, people that say that they love us, they're limiting us in our abilities to do more when they tell us, okay, you can't do that. Well, how do you know? How do you know if, words have power? They can tear down or they can build up. So when I hear, some parents that treat their kids like they're so limited, your kid believes in you. Your child believes in you. And it doesn't matter their age, even teenagers believe in you. Because even at my church, there were kids that I knew when they were young, and I still pour into them being older because they believe in you. They value what you have to say, especially if they look up to you. So when you tell your kids that they cannot do something, and that doesn't matter, honestly, even if they're not neurodivergent, if you tell your child that he or she cannot do something, they're going to probably believe it, and that could follow them the rest of their life, and they won't even try.
I I am so grateful for the parents that I have and for the extended family and not having to deal with that. My sister does counseling work and also did some chaplaincy work. And when I hear of the people who have had less than ideal circumstances, and then especially when they have flourished, but it is such a blessing for parents to be able to enable their kids. It's nice to hear about the role of the parent in that. Mhm.
Yes.
In terms of church wise, when I was some years back, I did a little kind of a side gig working with a paraplegic. And so I would do things like to take them to church and take them across in Canada, go across the border and do things with them. And it was fun. And one of the things that I learned pretty quickly was the things I didn't see at church and other places. So when I was with Wayne, I would go, oh, okay, Wayne needs me to help do this, or Wayne needs to help do that. Or I'd notice when he would go to a certain church for a special service, that pastor or that group of people, they have made the building so it's properly prepared for him, so he has easy access to do things. In the same way, I wonder what your thoughts would be in terms of pastors or leadership. How could churches be made a little bit easier for people with neurodivergence? What would some of your thoughts be on that? Like, what could they do to just make it a little bit more warm, a little bit more friendly, more welcoming? Insert whatever helpful thing might think of.
I would say there needs to be kind of a sense anywhere you go, it should be boundaries, but there needs to be a sense of liberty. And I
Mhm.
say that because I can only, like I said, speak for what I know. And at my church, where I live, there's this sense of liberty that you express God, your personal relationship with God freely. And it's beautiful. And so we have neurodivergence at my church, and it's just amazing. Like I said, when we come together and interact, we're a lot for some people, but we're still gonna be ourselves. And I feel like that's the beauty of it, is just feeling like you're able to just be yourself and not feel restricted. We don't do well with feeling restricted as far as our personalities, because we have very vivid, obvious personalities. For me with my ADHD, like I said, I'm very animated. So there's nothing like if I'm into the sermon that I'll say, yes, Lord, up and down, me. And everybody knows that they're like, that's what Tracy does. So
Mhm. Mhm. In terms of so you mentioned some of the if someone isn't expecting your personality style, but are there other things that that kind of hinder communication, or that you feel in some way you have to be, okay, I have to watch out for this, I have to watch out for that, because I have to be different to the normies, if you want to call them that.
it's just like I said, my parents raised me to know your environment, know your scene. And so I just kind of feel people out. And that's why I'll ask questions, or, I kind of try to pay attention to, my surroundings and stuff, and how people interact. So if I greet people, bubbly and friendly, and they're like, oh, hey, you're probably not my person, but that's okay. Like, I'm gonna speak to you and, be respectful and respect your boundaries, but you're not my person because I'm bubbly, friendly, and I am a hugger. So So like the people at my church know this, and it's just I guess it's become contagious because sometimes they'll just come around me and like, give me my hug, give me my hug. And I get excited. I am a hugger. Like I show my love through my hugs. And the kids love it, but even adults love it. So it's really nice. I'm not one of those people. I won't say I'll go around hugging men because I'm married, but I'll hug a stranger. If a female says, I just really need to hug that.
Right.
My hug might help them through the day. So I'm not gonna, fault somebody that needs a hug. And I've been in places where people just feel comfortable to just share with me their life story. I'm not gonna, tell them, why are you telling me all this? You don't even know me. Maybe they sense up, my spirit. So I listen.
Mhm. Would you say, so it seems to me like you are, and from what you're saying, would you describe yourself as pretty perceptive in observing other people's, behaviors and mannerisms?
For the most part, sometimes it's not always easy because, like I said, some people mask and they're not neurodivergent. They just, mask who they really are. So you just have to kind of, like I said, monitor. I try to see how people interact with other people and stuff and, go from there. But like I said, everybody's not, easy to read, like that. So.
Mhm. In terms of poetry, so okay, so you write a lot of poetry. Do you would like if someone asked you, does your neurodivergence give you a certain edge, or is it helpful in some way, or does it allow you to see the world in a unique way, or does it allow you to use words in a unique way, or something along those lines? What would you say to that?
Well, as I said before, I give credit where credit is due. I have to keep it consistent. God gives me the words. I just share the message. I'll give an example for the South Carolina ETV that I did this year, trying to do a poem to honor the Emmanuel Nine, the 9 lives that got tragically killed in the Emmanuel Church, Mother Emmanuel. I did a poem, but I'm going to tell you the backstory of that. Backstory was that God told me to do it. And I, didn't have a poem. I
Okay.
didn't have a poem. And he was like, just, get the interview set up and everything. So mind you, I'm literally going by faith. Like I am, reaching out to these people and I'm like, I don't even have a poem. We're gonna go with this. So once the interview got finalized for me to do the poem and perform it, that's when God gave me the poem. So there is a dependency that I have when it comes to God because, I tell people he put me here. I didn't put myself here. So there is only one I can give glory to. I can't give glory to myself because I didn't put myself here. And I definitely didn't know it was going to get as far as it did. So everything that people see, when it comes to the poetry and everything, it is divinely orchestrated by God. It is all in his plan, it's in his hands. And it's very humbling. I'm trying not to get emotional because yesterday I actually had found out something that I was like, blew my mind, that before it got started, God exposed me to what was to come. So I was already getting like emails about writing prior to me starting. And I didn't even remember that. I was like, when did this happen? This is like a couple of years ago before it even started. I'm like, what? And even down to the website that I use, Wix, sent me emails for that too. I'm like, that was years ago before it even started. So, it was really divine. Everything was that happened was supposed to happen. I just needed to be obedient. So everything that people see and they're amazed by, it is just obedience. So I hope it's an encouragement to people that you can obey God and things will happen. You just never know. I tell people, even God will tell you things that honestly does not make any sense. So I tell people, just do what God told you to do. Just do what God told you to do. And then maybe after he'll explain why you did it or it'll be revealed, but just do it. Because again, for South Carolina EDV, I had no point. No point. It was an act of faith. But just by me being willing to be obedient, the poem came about. So that's the beauty of God. Just obey him. You just never know.
You made a cool distinction about the difference between being gifted and given. Can you share more about that?
Yes, we live in a society that really tries to emphasize gifted, and there's nothing wrong being gifted. But being given is different. I have been given. I have been given this favor, this ability to hear from God and get downloads of his words that are amazing. But anyone can be given. But it comes with sacrifice. And that's a big thing that people don't want to talk about. They don't want to make sacrifices. But what do you really want? Like, people say they want the favor of God, but are you willing to sacrifice things for that favor? Mm-hmm. I'll give you another example. Like I said, I'm an open book. I used to make jewelry. So in previous interviews, you might see some jewelry that I had on. I made those. Okay. And one day, God asks me questions. He doesn't tell me, okay, stop doing this. He will ask me questions. And from those questions, it will convict me that I need to let it go. So God just asked me one day, when people ask or compliment the jewelry and they ask, who made it, what do you say? And I don't hesitate. I say, I made it. I made it. I made it. Who's getting glory out of that? I got you, Lord. I got you. Oh, let it go. So yes, someone might feel like that is so small, but I had been making jewelry since I was in the 7th grade. I'm 36. That was a long time. That was something that was a part of me. That's just a small act of sacrifice that I did for God. There are others, but I just wanted to give that simple example that there may be things that God says that you want to do, but he doesn't want you to do. Another thing for me was I wanted to do a stand-up comedy special to talk about my neurodivergence. I was like, I want to do that, people be laughing at me. So I'm like, I can do a comedy special. Then God said, well, who's going to get glory out of that? That's the relationship I have with God. So yeah.
That's interesting. The importance of the sacrifice. Did you want to say? You don't have to, but I just find I do. And in our culture, it might not be something that we talk about all that much because sacrifice isn't something that's all that fun. It can't.
Exactly. Nobody wants to sacrifice.
Right? Not really. Yeah.
But if you want to be given, then there is this beauty of it that's limitless. So if you're gifted, that's good, but there's limitations in being gifted. But when you're given, there's no limitations. That's why I'm willing to make the sacrifice to have that experience. So it's all in what you see the value. If you see it, if you see this beauty, this power, this anointing, spiritual wise anointing, it's awesome, and I just love that anyone can have it, but it's if you're willing to make that sacrifice. you're not going to just get it freely. You have to make the sacrifice. You have to be willing to forsake things. You know, God might tell you, you need to give up this relationship or give up this, you know, habit. And you have to be willing to do that if you want it.
Mhm.
Now you're seeing, people are seeing the amazing things that have happened in my life, but I had to make sacrifices. I'm not, you know, gonna sugarcoat it and say I didn't have to make sacrifices, but were the sacrifices worth what people are seeing now? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Times 10. But I had to go through things. I had to seek God, you know. It it's this stronger connection, this stronger bond that I have with God because I know I went through things and the only way I came out of those things was through him, helping me
Mhm.
through it and showing me the way. You know, there's a beautiful vulnerability when you recognize that you need God. You don't know everything. And I tell my husband, I was like, I've gotten to this place where I'm like, I know nothing. You know, and some people might say, like, you're putting yourself down. No, because as long as I know I need God and I can depend on God, there is nothing too hard for him. And I tell people, God puts me where he wants me to be. He puts me there, you know? So there's no attack, no, you know, anything that might try to come at me. It's not going to work because I know where my sufficiency lies. I know who I depend on. And that is the big factor.
Mhm. That was a pretty good sermon. Different people have different, and this is connected to what you're saying in terms of different, and we could call them relational practices with God, however we want to call it. But do you have any daily practices, whatever they might be, that you have done for a while now that you would, you're not telling people to be like you, but things that
Mhm.
you have found helpful. So, you mentioned the terms of like sacrifice and those things, in terms of daily practices that you particularly find helpful, useful, good. Are there any that you would suggest to other people?
Yes, I love to do devotionals in the morning with my husband.
Mhm.
And whether you're single or married, start your day with God. When you open that door, you know, to receive what he has for you, it is so beautiful and it is so rich because you never know what the day is going to bring you and you need that covering. So to we pray in the morning, we do confessionals, we read a chapter. He might read another chapter, I might read another chapter alone, but we read a chapter together. It just makes a huge difference when you have that foundation. I tell people, the more you consume God, he will consume you. So if you feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulder, you feel overwhelmed, you're probably not consuming, you know, the spiritual aspect enough. And that's why I said it's not just the sacrifices, it's the replacing it with godly habits.
Mhm.
So a lot of us have habits. Some are not good. So when you're letting go of those bad habits, you got to replace it with good habits. And starting the day with God makes a huge difference.
Mhm. Mhm. With your writing of poetry, do you have daily practices that you would say kind of help that, like whether that's journaling or reading rhymes, or what kind of things do you think kind of helps facilitate you being able to write the poetry that you do?
Well, like I said, I yield to God. I've been journaling for a while. I would just like write letters to God, so I still do that.
Okay,
And
okay.
yes, I'll say, "Dear God," and just thank Him for the day, and you know whatever I'm dealing with, and just pour. And so that's that relationship because it's like people want want the benefits of God, but they don't want to have a relationship with him. You can't have it both ways. If somebody barely talks to me, I don't want to do anything for them. If my husband, barely speaks to me or acts like, he doesn't want to be bothered me, I don't want to cook for him. So why do we think that we can just, use God for our own personal gain, but not spend time with him? Like you have to spend time with him. You have to be intimate with him. You show him that you love him, and you'll be surprised what he'll do for you and give to you freely. Rather it be freely given. And I tell people that I was like, if God gives it to me freely, then it's real. If I had to force it, it's not real. So people that, feel like they have to try to force and make things happen, that's not real. If it was for you, you wouldn't have to do all that. So just
One of the things that I noticed, and I heard it first on an interview and then looked more up, is your joy in helping nonprofits. And it's really nice when someone has a name and they help other people in the ways that they can. And I think we can all help. But that idea of you helping other nonprofits, can you talk a little bit about that?
yes, so give credit where credit is due. That was definitely God with that, because I grew up in a household where they taught us, someone is always more or less fortunate than you, give back and do. So it was instilled in me. But, as things progressed over the years and dealing with my own insecurities and things of that nature, I feel like I kind of fell off. But God had to remind me that I called you to be a servant. And I tell people, previously, like I said, I was a pre-K aide, but I also did a lot of servant role jobs where I cleaned public toilets, changed dirty diapers for kids, like the works, a lot of servanthood type things. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. And, I didn't see the benefit of it, feeling like I was made to feel less than a person. But I am grateful that God used those exact experiences for me to feel people. I can feel people's pain on a deeper level. I understand their struggles. I understand um, feeling as though no one wants to help, no one cares. I know what that feels like. And so because of that, I'm grateful that God, built the name so that I can help other people be uplifted. That's what it's all about. I don't understand people that have these platforms and they're just using it for themselves. Who's benefiting from that?
Mm-hmm.
Who's benefiting from that? And I know we connotate success as like monetary, but for me, I believe the success of others is my success. So what people see on my website, and the people that I've helped, that is my success, because that's going to last even when I'm gone. The information and the things that I did and shared for others to be empowered. That's what it's all about, and I love that God uses the poetry as a means of advocacy, that people can look within themselves and see what they can do to be better and change for the better. It's just a game changer. And it's like for anybody from any walk of life can be positively impacted by the words. And I just love it. I'm just grateful to be a servant.
Now, are your poems best read or listened to, or it's a variety?
It's definitely a variety. And that's why I said, it's all God, because if you ask most poets, like poets and spoken word artists, they've been kind of separated, within the years, because it's hard to go back and forth like that. It's not easy. So, for God to bridge that gap and bring it together, it's beautiful, so It's him. It's like I said, none of my life is common. So
Do you have any favorite stories in terms of working with children or working with maybe people who they don't think that they're ever going to be poetic in some like of artistic way, when you're with someone and you're able to inspire them to be more creative? Is there any story that comes to mind?
yes, I did a spoken word showcase a couple of years ago. I helped with that, and this young girl at the time, she was 14. Same time as when I started performing, I could see myself in her, and she's actually neurodivergent as well, have autism. So it was beautiful that I could like sense her, and I coached her, and she's been doing well. I try to instill in people, what I wish I had.
Mhm.
So I know sometimes people go through things and they get bitter, but it should make you better. So I use my experiences to make me better and to be that person for somebody that I wish I had. So that's what I did for her. And that was, you know, really impactful for me. I always love to see people that I've touched, whatever the age, feel inspired. Another thing for me was a Newsweek article that I did. Kids at school threatened me. I masked for 34 years. One of my he's older now. He's graduated. He's going to be going to college, but I knew him when he was in the third grade. And I hope I don't get emotional saying this, but he told me at church one day that he said, Miss Traci, I was doing homework and I saw your article for Newsweek. I didn't know you went through all that. And another time when I saw him again, because I'm not quick to just say things unless God leads me to say it. And I prayed to God, I said, Lord, what do you want me to tell him, with that? And he told me, and next time I saw him, I said, I just want you to remember, keep God first. You don't know where God will take you, but when you keep him first, he can do amazing things in your life. And I am proud to say that he got a scholarship. He wants to be a teacher. So I am just happy that anything that I've said, anything that I've done, even though it wasn't easy, because when you're putting yourself out there, it's never easy. And sometimes people don't always understand. Like I said, in the Black community, there's a negative stereotype. So it was a risk. It was a risk for me to do what I did, but I have no regrets because it's those successes that mean so much to me.
Mhm. Mhm. Cool, cool. I think we would also, the kind support from someone we do not know how potentially life-changing a kind, gracious seed or having a mentor. I mean, we can think of it like the teachers, the pastors, the uncles, the whoever it happens to be, who just you can go back in your mind. For me recently, I'm going back in my mind to someone who's passed, and I think to myself, oh, there were so many good things that person gave to me, and I would not be who I am right now if it wouldn't have been for that person just taking time. And sometimes that time isn't it's not even necessarily really, really intentional or planned out. It's just a person being with you and giving you presence and acknowledging you as a person. And then you kind of under that, just able to flourish a little bit more. And
Yes.
mhm, mhm, mhm. if if one of the questions I ask on interviews is because I believe that pastors have, unfortunately, a lesser effect on people than they did. I mean, 100 years ago, if a pastor said something, it was like, ooh, pastor said something, it was a bigger deal. Now, for a variety of reasons, it's not as much, but they still hold a lot of weight in their words. So if you were able to have all the pastors in a room and they were listening to you and they were smiling, because when we're smiling, we're a little bit more receptive, what would you, as the person who you are, as the poet, as the neurodivergent person, as just a person, as a woman, as a Black woman, those just being you, what would you want to tell pastors?
To see us and listen, listen. And it's not always us speaking, it's just our demeanor, our what we might be carrying. You just never know what a person is going through. And so having that love and feeling seen is so vital. And I have found that it is very effective. And it doesn't matter the age. That's why I said when I go out in public and people are talking to me, and some of them just tell me their life story, they tell me a lot. just just freely. And but I'm not going to make them feel bad about it, because maybe I just needed to be that listening ear. I may have just needed to be their person for that moment, and you just never know. And so I can only speak for what I know with my pastor, our bishop. He's just friendly to everyone. Like he treats people the same. Like no matter if they have a mental condition or anything, he's very loving. And I love what he said about it. He said, "You never know where your blessing is going to come from."
Mhm. Yeah,
You
yeah, yeah, yeah,
never
yeah,
know
yeah.
where your blessing is going to come from. And he's so right, because your kind act can be so impactful. And I'll share one more story about a kind act being impactful. I was in Ross during like the height of the pandemic. Me and my mom had our mask on, and this Black woman with her child, she was holding her baby in the carrier that she had. And I just saw her and I spoke to her. And even though she couldn't see me smiling, I feel like she could hear it in my voice. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
she responded and she was like, "Hi, you doing good?" I'm like, "Yes, you doing good?" Just a little simple, basic conversation, right? I ended up going to the dressing room and, tried on some dresses. And I went out of the dressing room and I started talking to my mother. And she came back around us and she asked me a question: "Is this yours?" It was my purse.
Oh, okay.
I left my purse in the dressing room, and she said, "We didn't I went through to see if I could find a license, and I said, I feel like this is her. This is her, purse." She spoke to me, mom. She spoke to me. She said it to her mom. And I just got emotional, because if the right person could have took my purse, I would have never, found
Mhm.
it or anything like that. But that moment prior, even my mom said it could have been totally different. It could have been, and it could have be just my simple interaction with her, acknowledging her. You just never know. So I shared that story to just be mindful, be courteous, be kind to people.
Mhm.
You never know.
Mhm.
That could be your blessing, and that was my blessing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Hmm. I've been, the verse that talks about um, being hospitable to being hospitable to strangers because you can be entertaining angels unaware.
Yes.
And I've thought of this a number of times. We think, in terms of scripture wise, I mean, those words are there for us, and the fact that it's there, I really wonder how often that happens. From sometimes you'll have this feeling, you'll walk by someone in the wherever it is, and you just kind of have, that's a good feeling. It's like a good smell, except it's a feeling. Right? That's good. I wonder, maybe that was an angel, or that was someone who was just praying, or they were just fresh from an experience with God, or whatever. But that thing of being friendly, it's like that's in scripture. We're supposed to take that as real. That idea that we could be friendly to an angel, and then they talk to us, or they're with us, or they're something. I think it's really something that's, I think of it more often now in terms of, and that's not, I mean, you don't be friendly to people for something else. That's not the right way.
Mhm.
But, yeah, sometimes I think, we're friendly to people and we might just We might just be smiling to an angel or, giving that kind word. But yeah, in general, I love that. So important to know how we could change someone's day or even week or set a trajectory because it's the small things, right? It's these small things. Do you have any final thoughts or things that I'm sorry, I didn't really stick to the script very good. Do you have anything you want to say or anything more you want to tell people?
No, I guess the last thing is just trust God. You may not always understand where things will lead, but if you trust God every step of the way, He will see you through. And He's
Mm-hmm.
definitely done it in my life. So
Thank you very, very much for this, for the time, for your face, for the smiles, for the voice. Thank you very, very much. And I will put links to your website. Is there anywhere else people should look for you? Oh, you have children's books, don't you?
yes,
Okay, now is that something easily available, findable on your website? I assume everything is on the
yes,
website.
yes.
Yeah,
Everything is on the website. I tell you,
everything.
it's a one-stop shop.
Okay. Okay, that will be put up. Um, Again, thank you very, very much for this.
Thank you for having me.